Hello and welcome to episode 49 of Hitting the Bar, the football podcast. I'm Chris Karle.
And I'm Geoff Saunders.
Well, Geoff, of course the season has finished, but the big game we have to speak about, the FA Cup final, we've got to get that out of the way. But before we do, something more pleasant, your trivia question.
Real Madrid managed to win the Premier Liga eventually this season, courtesy of Sergio Ramos and his penalties. Ramos scored 22 penalties in a row, and the question was, is this a record? Well, no it isn't, because between 4th of August 2015 and February 2018, Robert Lewandowski scored 31 penalties in a row. 31 attempts, 31 goals. But that isn't even the record. The record is 37 in competitive games, and it was done in the Premier League. So who got 37 penalties in a row in the Premier League?
That's just ridiculous. That's crazy. We'll find out who that was at the end of the show. All right, well, Arsenal won a trophy. You know, I was gloating a little bit, Geoff, at the end of the season that Tottenham finished higher than Arsenal again. My team, Tottenham, of course. And then, of course, Arsenal went and won a trophy. And I suppose the big question is, and we know the answer, would you prefer to finish 6th without a trophy or 8th behind your bitter rivals and win a trophy? And, of course, you'd prefer a trophy. So all I've seen from all the Arsenal people and fans that I know on Facebook and everywhere else is we've won, Arsenal won a trophy, and then some comments about Tottenham. I don't know why you can't just celebrate a trophy without mentioning your rivals, but that's the nature of Arsenal fans, I suppose. But I watched the game. Chelsea were ahead for the opening period until they lost their captain through injury, and then they lost their shape, and Arsenal took full advantage, to be honest. They worked Chelsea out in the new formation. The problem for me was there was a little bit of bias from the referee, Anthony Taylor. There was a handball outside the box by the Arsenal goalkeeper, went completely unnoticed, completely unchecked by VAR. We've had VAR all season, and yet it didn't seem very noticeable during the FA Cup. Nevertheless, that does mean Arsenal have won a trophy. Their 14th FA Cup, and that means they're in Europe.
Yeah, but of course they lose one player in the squad, because I think UEFA have said that they've got to actually put Taylor in the squad now. So there is a downside to it for them, but the issue for the Wanderers is always going to be about what happens with Aubameyang. Does he stay? Does he go? Can they afford to pay enough money to keep him? Will Arsenal have to do what Sanchez and Manchester United have agreed to do? Basically, United are going to pay Sanchez a year of his salary. He disappears and goes to Inter.
Well, I read that Arsenal are thinking of offering him a couple of $100,000 a week to keep him. Now they've got European football, such as it is, the Europa League, and a trophy. He's 31, so as you've said on this show, it's a bit limited where he could go. But would you want to lose your star goal scorer? Or are they going to go the same way they went with Ozil and just have him sat there taking the money and running down his contract? Or are they going to sell him, and who will they get in his place? Because they're limited, aren't they, Arsenal?
Well, the issue is that for the money they can get for him, they can't get that many, the same number of goals. That's the problem. I mean, what's a 32-year-old striker, what's he worth? And how much can you get for him? And it's not going to be a lot. So they're, between a rock and a hard place, aren't they? But either way, it doesn't look good for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I was an Arsenal fan, God forbid, I think I'd be very, very worried that we're not going to hang on to our star striker. As a Tottenham fan, I am worried that we're not going to hang on to our star striker. Harry Kane, there's not been a lot of talk about anybody coming in for him yet. However, do you think that means that Arteta has improved Arsenal and he's won a trophy in his first season? Is he to be praised for that? Because, let's be fair, they did beat Manchester City on the way to the final.
Yeah, and that match against Manchester City was the first sign that he's actually doing something and delivering something. But it was a sign. It wasn't it wasn't the result, was it? They've got to be able to do that every week. They've shown that they are not capable of doing that every week. They luckily won the FA Cup courtesy of the referee. That means nothing. So they need to show that they can perform in the same way that they did against City in every match. They've done it in one match since he started. When Emery left, they were 8th and they finished 8th. And they had one good match in between. Now, okay, that's a sign of something better, but that's all it is. It's a sign. He's not the completed deal. And winning an FA Cup that nobody cared about, well, okay, make a fuss about that if you want.
Yeah, I mean, congratulations to our Arsenal friends and fans. You've got a cup. Well done. I'm still happy that Tottenham finished above them. That means we had a better season overall over a certain amount of matches. I suppose I'm being a little bit bitter, but I did feel the referee helped them on the way to that cup. It was probably just as well there was nobody there to watch it in the stadium. For me, it wasn't a great game particularly. My attention attention did drift off. But where does that leave Frank Lampard and Chelsea then? Let's look at the losers a little bit, because people, have been saying, is Frank Lampard up to the job? He has lost some important matches, and he has lost matches that perhaps he should have won, notwithstanding, of course, twice against your team, West Ham. So is Frank up to the job? What's he proven this season? Never mind about Arteta, we've seen that. I think
what Lampard has proven himself this season, first of all, he learns as he goes, and he doesn't make the same mistake twice. They did finish fourth when outside the European position, so I think he's done extremely well, actually. There is a lot of rubbish talked about Chelsea and about their defence, and I can only assume it's people who can't read, because if you can read, then you'll see that in all of the defensive stats, they're good except for two areas. One, they're second worst in goals conceded against the break, which he hasn't sorted out, and goalkeeper. And Kepa doesn't just have the worst save stats this season, he has the worst save stats ever since they started collecting the stats. 56.5% is his save percentage. It's chronically bad. The way you measure a defence is how many shots do they give away per match, how many shots on target, and Chelsea are second best in both of those stats this season. So the defence is not a disaster at all. People obviously cannot read.
Right, so the problem is Kepa the keeper at Chelsea. They may very well get a new keeper during the off-season. Transfer window is now open. We'll talk about that in a moment, but let's move our attention to a game that happened last night. We're recording this on Wednesday morning. Last night we had the Championship playoff between two teams 4 miles apart, Brentford and Fulham. Brentford never been in the Premier League, that stands. Fulham, we couldn't believe, coming straight back up again. I'd forgotten they'd been only relegated last season. It took extra time though, Geoff, but the manager, I want to talk about the manager, ex-Tottenham player Scott Parker. He's brought them back in his first season into the Premier League. What do you make of him and Fulham?
Well, I saw the match, and I would say that Fulham deserved to win. Brentford didn't really show up. It might have been one of the worst matches that they've played this season. But I think Fulham, judging on that performance last night, must be favourites to go down next season. That team can't survive in the Premier League.
So they were. That's how bad they were, really, because I didn't see the game, but I was following it online, and it seemed like for 100 or so minutes, neither team really did very much at all. And according to the commentator, it was, apart from the magnitude of the occasion, there was nothing else to say about the game. It was pretty dull. They're going to come up against some strong opposition.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was dull, but the problem was both teams were finding it too easy to retrieve the ball and make 50 yards progress. But you don't get that in the Premier League. Teams press. I mean, I know Tottenham don't, but the teams that press are going to kill them, because they're not going to get the space to pass the ball around the way that both Fulham and Brentford did, from their own penalty area to 30 yards from the opposition goal. There were no challenges made in those teams. They were pinging the ball about. They thought, oh, this looks nice. They're not going to be able to do it next season in the Premier League.
So either Fulham are going to have to buy players, but we know Aston Villa bought a load of players, and we know that nearly took them back down again.
Yeah, and that was the problem with Fulham last season. They were promoted and they bought a lot of players, and that screwed them. So they've just come out of this. And Parker was saying yesterday, I hope we don't do the same thing again, and I hope we stick with the players that got us up. But they're not good enough.
So already we have an early tip from Geoff for relegation. It's going to be Fulham. Be interesting to see, though. And yet another London derby for Tottenham and Arsenal fans. What do you think of Scott Parker? I mean, he's an ex-Tottenham boy, so I'm quite pleased for him. His first season there. What did you make of his management style, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, he seems to be good. He's got them to where they are, and that's after 46 games, is it, that they play or something? So, it's not a flash in the pan. He's clearly a decent manager. I think he needs to do a good job either there again or somewhere else, but it looks as if he's a good manager. The football they're trying to play, and the football they did play in the Championship, was attractive. It's good to watch. No problem.
All right, talking of young managers, I suppose, just been relegated going the other way, Bournemouth and Eddie Howe, and they have, by mutual consent, I love that expression, by mutual consent, Eddie Howe has left Bournemouth. He was there, man and boy, player and manager, for 25 years. He did have a short break when he went away to manage Burnley, quite badly, as it turned out. However, he's kind of left the club as a hero, one of those sort of managers that leaves without tainting his record, and lots of messages of good luck and sympathy from fans. No bad feeling towards him, which is a great way to bow out. But what do you think happened, and where do you think he's going to go?
Well, what happened, I think, was he'd said everything he could say, and the players had heard everything he had to say, and that, maybe there is a lifespan for a manager, unless you can continue to reinvent the team in the way Ferguson did. But Bournemouth don't have Manchester United's money to buy Premier League titles, so that isn't an option for them. I'd like to see him go to another club. I would have loved to see him go to Tottenham, because I think he's a perfect Tottenham manager, and show that he can do it at the next level up. So good luck to him. He's been brilliant. The Bournemouth were dead and buried, not just as a football club, but as a limited company. When he took them over, rescued them, kept them in the Football League, took them to the 8th place in the Premier League. That's phenomenal.
Actually, yeah. I mean, you've got to remember that when he became manager, they were just about to go out of the league. He took over 12 years ago. In 12 years, they've come from being bottom, so the 90th club, to the 8th club in 12 years. Took them through all the divisions. That's a hell of an achievement. But like you said, you think he'd have been a typical Tottenham manager or a Tottenham style manager. For me now, though, I'm a bit worried. No, I'm not worried for him. But don't you think now that he's actually a relegated manager who was sacked after relegation, isn't he going to find it difficult to find a job? And then you've got clubs like, Aston Villa, going to probably hang on to their manager, Dean Smith, despite almost going down. The other clubs in the Premier League looks like they're all going to hang on to their managers. Maybe Watford will get a new manager.
Well, I think we can be fairly certain that 4 managers will lose their jobs before the end of October, because they always do.
I hadn't thought about it like that. I just was trying to imagine where it would go currently, and there aren't any teams that look like they're about to sack anybody. I think that's all been done, hasn't it, now? But maybe you're right. By October, some vacancies will come up. I don't think he'll go to Tottenham. I think Mourinho will probably still be there come October. But where would he fit in? Who'd take a risk with him? Because, is he tainted because he got relegated?
No, I don't think he is at all. He's got 12 years of experience he can point to, and 12 years of success he can point to. Small team get relegated. Well, it kind of happens, doesn't it? The average is from promotion to the Premier League to relegation is 3.8 years. He kept them in there for 5. So he's overachieved on any measure you can you care to mention. So yes, somebody will appoint him. I do hope Tottenham get rid of Mourinho, but I don't think it will happen this side of Christmas. But I'd love to see him at Tottenham, because he's exactly the sort of manager they need.
Well, you mentioned Tottenham there. Of course, they're having a bit of a clear out, Tottenham, because of course they need to sell players or get rid of players before they can afford to buy anybody. I think maybe Daniel Levy has done some good business. You're telling me that Tottenham have definitely signed Højbjerg from Southampton for 15 million. I think, and this means Southampton have been levied by Daniel Levy. I think in exchange we sold them Walker Peters for 10 million. So I think we might have got a good deal there, Tottenham. But there are a lot of players on their way out. Form has already gone, of course. Vertonghen has gone. I think there's about another 5 players to go out the door. Possibly Danny Rose will make a permanent move to Newcastle. And there are several others that are on their way out. A few academy players as well. Who do you think Tottenham will get in, and who will they manage to hang on to? There are some, like Harry Kane, we've got to hang on to. And is that Højbjerg a good deal for Tottenham?
Yeah, Højbjerg is a very good deal. He broke into the Bayern team as a 16, 17-year-old under Guardiola. He's a very, very good player. His progress has been held back by some very bad injuries, sort of like season-long injuries that he's had. 15 million is an absolute steal. It really is. You mentioned Danny Rose. Rose has said publicly he wants to stay at Tottenham. He doesn't like getting stopped and asked to prove that the car he's driving is his, but then that's the police for you, so, what do you expect? As to who Tottenham need, I don't know. Tottenham have got to hang on to Kane, or say, okay, we sell him, we get as much money as possible, and we rebuild. So, I don't know which way they're going to go. And I'm very suspicious about how quiet it is with Kane, which is usually a sign there's a deal being done somewhere.
I was just thinking the opposite, in a way that we've got away with it for so many seasons that you never see anybody coming in and bidding for Kane. I don't know how it works behind the scenes. We're not in professional football management or anything. Whether Levy at the start of the transfer window just says, before you ask, no. Because you never see anybody, sort of bidding 100 million for Kane, but this might be the season, mightn't it? This might be it. I mean, it might be cheap because of the COVID thing. It might be a bargain. It'd be a bargain anyway. But if we lost him, I don't know who I'd like to see come in his place. But there is talk again about Gareth Bale going back to Tottenham. Where would he fit in? And would he fit into Mourinho's style?
Well, Bale back to Tottenham, no. I can't see where he'd fit in. And regarding Mourinho, no. I can't imagine. I would imagine Mourinho would just put his foot down and say, no, not a chance. He's not a Mourinho player, is he? The one thing that Mourinho wide players have to do is tackle back. He doesn't give a stuff about how good they are at crossing the ball or how many goals they score, as long as they're back helping the fullback. So I can't see that at all. There is a deal to be done there with Real Madrid, a swap for Benzema, and you have Benzema on 50 million or something, and 3 years of Benzema with his goal record would be fantastic. So, there's something that's worth doing there, but I don't think it involves Bale.
All right, well, that's Tottenham. I mean, I as I say, there's a lot of players being shown the door, and Mourinho does have to do something. I agree with you. He'll still be there at Christmas. I think he's, as he always does, he's got a big project and plans for the future, but we'll see what happens with that. Another team in the news, of course, is Newcastle. We've discussed the Newcastle takeover by the Saudi Arabian consortium. Sorry, when I say consortium, I mean government. We've discussed that before about how disgusting that will be. That's now off the table, Jeff. Give me some details, because you're a businessman, it's quite complicated, but they pulled out, didn't they?
Well, actually, I don't believe they have pulled out. What they did was announce that they pulled out. One thing to bear in mind, the deposit that they gave Ashley was non-returnable, so Ashley is now sitting on £17 million of their money, which they will have lost immediately. Now, go back a couple of weeks, and Saudi Arabia announced that they were clamping down on this piracy, which was the issue which the Premier League football clubs didn't care about, killing people and dismembering them and all of that. That doesn't matter. But allowing these pirate and be out people to show Premier League matches, that's terrible. So despite the fact that the head, the top man in Saudi Arabia, was the top man of the company that was doing it, apparently there was he didn't know it was happening, and he's announced that now he does know he's clamped down on it, and then a few days later he announces that he's withdrawn the bid. So now what I believe is now happening behind the scenes is the British government is throwing all its weight behind this deal and trying to force the Premier League to backtrack and say, no, you passed the fit and proper person test, because look how they're clamping down on this piracy now. They showed how honest they are by withdrawing the bid, and I believe that we will see within the next week to 10 days the deal is very much back on, and the UK government will force the Premier League's hand and force the deal to go through.
That's an interesting take on it. I mean, the whole thing about the British government saying, yes, it's all right, what I see is the hypocrisy, because meanwhile, while the British government and the Premier League are looking at are they fit and proper to take over a football club, Britain is actually selling arms, weapons to kill people to Saudi Arabia, and they're investigating them to see if they're morally sufficient, whether they are allowed to take over a football club. So I don't think the British government are the best ones to judge, or in a position to judge.
Yeah, but just think about what you said, and I think that's the proof that it's happening. Yes, they are a completely morally bankrupt state. The UK government is dealing with them and selling them billions and billions of pounds worth of arms. You think the British government cares about morality in football? No. But do you think the British government cares about losing billions of pounds worth of arms sales? Yeah, well, there you go.
Yeah, I think we've answered the question there. So Newcastle possibly still going to be taken over by that Saudi Arabian corporation. Consortium. I was a bit disappointed, I suppose, to see so many Newcastle fans and so many rational, ordinary and educated people coming out and saying how disappointed they were. And the new narrative, it seems, coming from Newcastle fans is not only would it make us Champions League potentials, but also, it's a shame because they were going to invest in the community and in the region. region. Well, this is another sort of excuse for turning a blind eye to the beheadings, the killings, the clamp down on democracy, the clamp down on journalism and free speech, which doesn't seem to worry them at all. Now, you're a West Ham fan. We've got some friends who are Man United fans, very, very vehement Man United fans, who said they find it very difficult to support their team should they be owned by such a group. And if they took over Tottenham, I would find it very hard to support the success that Tottenham would then benefit from. So if Tottenham were taken over by a Saudi Arabian or whatever, North Korean corporation, and then went and bought Benzema, Bale, Jadon Sancho, etc., and then won the Champions League and the Premier League, I'd find it a very bitter pill to swallow, and I'd find it very hard to celebrate.
No, I agree 100%. I mean, if that happens to your club, you're better off not watching football at all. Go down to the park and watch your local team. You know, honestly, it's the sensible thing to do. If you're in North London and, you know, this happened to you, Tom, go and watch Barnet. Why not?
Yes, I think I would have to do that. I would find it very, very difficult. I mean, it's difficult enough with the kind of owners that every club has as it is, and the moral bankruptcy, to use your term, that permeates football quite deeply. But for me, this is just a step too far. Now then, let's move on then to what do you think about Wigan and what's happened to them?
I have no idea what to think about Wigan. I cannot work out where any of the parties have got the money. You know, for this guy to put Wigan into administration, there has to be a route out for him whereby he gets back the 46.5 million, and I can't see where it happens. We do not have enough information to say anything. It's absolutely extraordinary. But the 12-point deduction has been confirmed. The Wigan administrators appealed against it. You know, they never stood a chance, and they knew they didn't stand a chance, but they had to do it. So yes, Wigan are relegated. Barnsley survive. The question that I find as much of a puzzle is that Sheffield Wednesday have just were done earlier this season for a basically fraudulent deal about selling their grounds to somebody that was not a third party. So they sold it to themselves and attempted to claim that the money was new money and they weren't breaking the financial fair play rules, etc., etc. They got a 12-point deduction, but their 12-point deduction only applies next season. The 12-point deduction for Sheffield Wednesday does not apply in the season in which they committed the offence. How come? And the answer to how come is that it would have meant Sheffield Wednesday being relegated, Charlton surviving. So why? Well, yeah. I mean, why has the Football League moved the penalty to next season so that Sheffield Wednesday don't get relegated? It's wrong.
I don't understand that. I understand when Manchester United or Liverpool get favour in various decisions over Tottenham, West Ham and further down the table, whether that be UEFA or the FA, because you want the glamorous clubs in the competitions, etc. But what's the difference between Wigan and Sheffield Wednesday? Why are Sheffield Wednesday being favoured and Charlton basically being punished and Barnsley being rewarded, in a way, for Wigan and Sheffield Wednesday's failings? Surely they both committed the same offences or similar offences during the same period. So why is Sheffield Wednesday special then? What is it about them? Is it because they've got money to survive and Wigan haven't, so they'd probably falter anyway? Is it something to do with that?
I have absolutely no idea. I cannot understand it. Maybe it's to do with the owners of Sheffield Wednesday being in the country and, you know, operating in Sheffield. Maybe I don't know. But if you have a penalty, and you know, although the offences were slightly different, the penalties were exactly the same. Why is one applied to this season and one applied to next season? It's very, very strange. So I really don't know the answer.
Yes, very, very strange. So Wigan go down, Sheffield Wednesday fight on, but with a penalty next season, so they'll just be delayed going down maybe. In the other news, of course, we've spoken about him so much, but you and I are big admirers of the talent that is young Jadon Sancho, 20 years old, Borussia Dortmund in negotiations to sell him to Manchester United, who seem to be the only team that can, afford him. Man United don't want to pay more than 100 million, Borussia Dortmund want a little bit over that. Negotiations are going on, but Man United also in for Jack Grealish. Can we compare and contrast?
Well, there is no comparison between Sancho and Grealish. They play in very different positions. Sancho has scored as many goals as Sterling, and he's made as many goals as De Bruyne. So you add, how much would you pay for Sterling? 90 million. How much would you pay for De Bruyne? 90 million. So anything under 180 million, you've got a bargain, haven't you? And you get that in one player. You still got another player you can put on the pitch. So 110 million is an absolute bargain for Manchester United. No question at all. Now, the problem is, even Manchester United can't put their hands on 110 million in one hit, and most transfers nowadays, the vast majority, are done with payments staged over the initial contract of the player. And that is what Manchester United and Borussia Dortmund are talking about at the moment. How much do we pay this year? How much next year? Etc., etc. Now, Grealish is approximately, every one of his measurables is 1/3 of Jadon Sancho's in terms of goals, assists, etc. But he's a completely different player, does a completely different thing in a different part of the pitch. And personally, I'd like a team that had both of them in it. But Manchester United are actually quite well served in the area that Grealish plays, and they don't need him as well as Sancho. So if they didn't get Sancho, they could buy him and move somebody else wide right. Was it Daniel James they got from Swansea last? I mean, he never looked up to it from the very beginning and still doesn't look like a Premier League player. But they've got a lot of pace up front, so they can pick and mix there. And Grealish could fit in that inside left position that he plays extremely well. He should be playing for a team of the stature of Manchester United, no question. I'd have him in any team of mine. He's a great player. Just not the level. Sancho is far and away, head and shoulders above any other English player at the moment. Far and away the best English player in the world. And 110 million is a steal.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to agree with that. I think they're in for both players. You can see why. Jack Grealish is, never going to be as good as or as brilliant as Jadon Sancho. But they are different players. But Jack Grealish is good enough for Manchester United. I think I'd have him at Tottenham. I'm not sure where he'd fit in, to be honest. I think he would be a Tottenham-esque player, actually. I think he's very, very in the style of Tottenham, as I see them and as Tottenham fans see them. And of course, I'd have Jadon Sancho. In fact, the way Tottenham have been this last season, you could have just put Jadon Sancho on the pitch on his own to say the 11 off, and would have probably still finished 8th. He's that good. But so I think, 100 million or plus add-ons, as you were saying, up to 120 I think Man United would bite their hand off. Jack Grealish, yes, he'd be a good backup for Man United, but I think he'd fit in at Tottenham perfectly. Maybe we'll snap him up when United don't need him if they get Sancho. Yeah,
just look at the stats for Grealish for a second. 10 assists, 10 goals. Compare that to Pogba, 7 goals, 7 assists. So Pogba isn't as good as Grealish. And those numbers for Pogba, by the way, that's not that this year was especially bad. That's his average over his career. He was very, very good in that Juventus side with Pirlo. The whole side arranged around Pirlo, and his, Pogba's speciality was getting goals number 3 and 5 in a 5-0 thrashing. Pirlo ran the show, not Pogba, and 7 goals, 7 assists. That's his career average. It's not great. It is not great.
Actually, if you put it that way, not only is it not great, you're talking about a team that finished 3rd in the league. Aston Villa barely stayed up in the league, and yet Grealish managed to get those stats in a team that was not scoring goals and winning games. So that kind of, for me, that's an extra 20%. On top, so because of difficulty for him to score or whatever. So Jack Grealish probably better than Pogba. So what's he worth? 80 million? What are they going to pay for him? A lot less than that, I think. There was talk that Aston Villa were going to offer him $100,000 a week to stay.
Well, if he goes to any better club, he's going to get more money just as a consequence of the deal. So if he went to Manchester United, even if he wasn't guaranteed a starting position, he'd probably start on about 140,000 a week. I think all Aston Villa are doing is doing him a favour and just trying to make sure that his next deal with whoever it is as big a one as it can possibly be. Very often when you see players sign a contract extension in the middle of the previous contract, it's because there is actually a deal being done and they're looking after the player to make sure that the fee is much higher and also that the player gets a lot more money.
Right, by the way, you mentioned Daniel James there for Manchester United, who everybody said, what a prospect, and then he's not done anything. Apart from a few good step-overs and everything, he has got a lot of pace. He has got a lot of pace, but he just doesn't fit. So far, hasn't really made the grade at United. So we'll see what signings they make and everybody else makes over the next few days. With Sancho, Dortmund want it done by the 10th of August. Apparently, they want it out and done and move on to the next season. Manchester City have said goodbye to Silva, who was brilliant for them over the 10 years he was there. But they've made a new signing, Geoff.
Yeah, they've gone back to Valencia, where they got Silva from, and got Ferran Torres, who's a very, very good winger, and only paid 24.5 million for him. And this continues a pattern that Manchester City have been doing for the past few years, which is saying, okay, this player is worth X, and pulling out of the bidding when the price was looking to go above X, which is exactly what they did with Maguire. Their limit was 65 million. When it went above 65 million, they said no. They've replaced Silva with Ferran Torres. Looks a good buy. Yeah, Maguire has shown that he was not the answer and definitely not worth 80 million. He was one of the disappointments, one of those up in amongst the group for the worst player of the year. So, Maguire does what Maguire does. He's a stopper. He hasn't got any pace. He can't pass. So don't expect him to be a pacey central defender who can pass. Rio Ferdinand, he ain't.
That's a good one, yeah. He's not no Rio Ferdinand. And he got a lot of stick, didn't he, Ferdinand? But what a player, actually. To be fair, he did exactly what he was supposed to. I don't think Maguire has. One last thing about Man United, since we're talking about transfers. David De Gea, is he on the move? Because they're in for a couple of, the rumours have it, they're in for a couple of goalkeepers now, Manchester United. I mean, they should move Henderson up, shouldn't they?
Of course they should. He's the stats show he's the second best goalkeeper in the Premier League this season. Now, there is a problem with stats and Alisson being out for a long part of the season and Fabianski also. But the fact is, Henderson is the best English goalkeeper around and they should just stick him in the team. And if you can't sell De Gea, then send him out on loan. They will be able to sell De Gea. They only invested 19 million in him, so they'll get their money back. Chelsea have got the bigger problem with Arrizabalaga. They're going to have to send him out on loan because nobody's going to buy him, and they're not going to write off 72 million. They could have bought Alisson for less than that. I mean, it's extraordinary. But he's shown he's not up to it, so he'll go out on loan, probably somewhere in Spain, maybe back where he came from.
Yeah, problem with keepers everywhere, really. Still don't understand it, like you, why they paid all that money for that keeper, Kepa. Very, very strange decision that. We've got Pope, of course, and Henderson, and several other good goalkeepers around, so I think Man United will have to move on De Gea while they've got the chance.
Yeah, I mean, the best prospects are Onana at Ajax, who's an excellent keeper, and probably in the top three keepers in the world, Oblak at Atletico Madrid. So somebody is going to pay a lot of money for Oblak this year. And if you've got a goalie you can send the other way, like De Gea, who will go back to Atletico Madrid, that might be a reasonable deal for everyone. So here you have De Gea and 50 million, and we'll have Oblak. That makes sense as a deal.
Well, we're on the subject, kind of. Iker Casillas has retired. Long career for him. Few players sort of retiring this season. A lot of young players coming through, like Jadon Sancho, as we've said. Well, that's about all we've got time for. We've got a lot of European football coming up this week, Europa League and Champions League. We won't do all the predictions for that. Man United are 5-0 up at half-time, if you like, so kind of obvious.
And Chelsea are 3-0 down.
Yeah, so really, there's not a lot to predict there. But Europa League football just keeps going and going and going right up until the beginning of next season. We'll be back next week, but before that, Jeff's trivia question and the answer.
There was a lot of newspaper comment around Sergio Ramos scoring 22 penalties in a row, which is what won the league for Real Madrid. Was that a record? Well, no, it wasn't. Robert Lewandowski, between August 2015 and February 2018, 31 penalties in a row. 31 consecutive penalties scored. But that isn't even the record. The record is 37, which was done in the Premier League. Who did it? And the answer is Ricky Lambert. He scored 3 penalties before joining Southampton, then converted all 34 of his Saints spot kicks. He then missed one in a friendly for Liverpool before scoring one more, so he actually got 38, but only 37 in competitive matches. 37 in a row.
Now that is a goal scorer. That is a brilliant record. 37, 38, well 38 if you count, penalties in a row, without missing one. Wake up and smell the coffee, Ronaldo. That's a player. Well done, Ricky Lambert. That's fantastic. That's all we've got time for. I'm Chris Karle.
And I'm Geoff Saunders.
And that was Hitting the Bar, the football podcast.